Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Divorce Differently podcast. This week, we're going to be talking about one of the hardest decisions you'll probably have to make in your entire life, deciding whether you want to stay in your marriage or whether you want a divorce. Now, I get a lot of people coming to me just at that stage because it's really a critical point, and a lot of people are worried about what does that road look like if I proceed. But really, there's a multitude of different questions, fears, concerns that get in the way of that decision. And so today I wanted us to talk a little bit about why it's such a hard decision to make and some of the tools you could potentially use to try and help unlock the situation and make that decision easier. So my guest this week is Naomi Stonier. Naomi is a relationship and couples coach. She's got over 5 years experience, and she holds both couples and individuals sessions to help them heal, repair, and transform their romantic relationship. Naomi trained with Tony Robbins' coach training school, and she's a Relational Life Institute couples coach. Most importantly, this is a path that she's walked herself. So Naomi, you've worked with a lot of people in dysfunctional relationships who have moved into thriving ones, and you've helped through your professional training and your own living experience to help people through these transitions. So thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you today.
Thank you so much for having me on. I can't wait to talk to you about this subject.
So I'm sure you see a lot of couples facing all sorts of decisions and difficult situations. But why do you think that this particular one, do we stay together, do we part ways, is such a hard one to make?
Yeah, should I stay or should I go? Or I don't know if I want to stay or go
Yes.
is a really common problem that comes into coaching with me. The most common is I don't know,
Yes.
which is very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's there is safety in not knowing.
Mhm.
Yeah, if I
Yeah.
don't know, I don't have to make a decision.
Don't have to. Exactly.
Yeah. So that's one issue, that's one problem. And then the other one is uh is a more practical, should I stay or should I go? I think there are people which you will see a lot of. You will see
Yes.
more of it. I see that I don't know. Well, you probably see both as well. But the logistics of leaving are so overwhelming. There's
The
that.
uncertainty as
Yeah.
well.
The but then the other one is the children.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's a very common concern. Yeah.
Yeah. And so um I don't know which one of those you want to address first.
Well, I think there is a interesting piece there about the kind of stable ambiguity that somehow
Yeah.
is comforting to people, right?
Yeah.
And so I'd love to tap into that and kind of,
Yeah.
how you work through that with folks.
Yeah. So miserable, comfortable
Mm,
is the brain loves familiar.
yeah,
And that's how we stay safe. You do
we were
what you
wired that
know.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, we're wired that way. You do what you know. So even if it's harming you, if it's
Mm,
familiar, you'll keep
yeah.
doing it.
Mm,
So uh, change, either leaving or working on your relationship, is dangerous.
yeah.
So we stay miserable, comfortable. So it will be familiar to just be in the discomfort of an unhappy marriage.
Yeah.
And so we
How do you help
stay.
people break through that then?
I help people understand how we make decisions.
Mhm.
So humans are making decisions because we don't know how our emotions are created. We're
Yeah.
making our decisions to either change or avoid emotions.
Mm,
So I work with people who change relationships, they change jobs, they change where they live.
mhm.
Myself, I lived in 8 different countries.
Wow.
I would literally up sticks and move. This was over a 6 year period to try, to change my emotions.
Yeah.
But wherever I went, there I was. So you have that issue which is people jumping through lots of relationships, but then you also have people avoiding emotions
Yeah.
and emotions involved in breaking up a marriage are extremely uncomfortable. Our brain doesn't know the difference between real or imaginary danger.
Mhm.
So these emotions are real danger, intensely uncomfortable, and they will stop you from taking action.
Yeah. And that's kind of, it comes back to that uncertainty factor. Familiarity doesn't have as much uncertainty built in. And when you're going to break that, that pattern,
Mm,
the model you've got in
mm,
place,
mm.
for a while there, you don't know what shape it's going to take. And I
Yeah.
think that's where those horror stories you were mentioning earlier do seep in. And then
Yes.
you enter a sphere of fear. And I have a lot of clients who I see, I've had clients that I worked with for months where there's always a new excuse not to move. And
Yeah.
I say that
That's it.
without any kind of judgment. It's just there's always something. Oh, but I want to wait until my kids' GCSEs are gone because I don't want to do
Yeah.
it during their GCSEs. Oh, but then now it's the summer and we're going to go on holiday. We've got this thing booked. Well, I'll do it in September. And then in September, something else happens. And the reality is that none of those reasons are the real reason why they're not proceeding, right?
Yeah.
It's a fear, as you say, it's a comfort, and
Mm,
it's that fear of what could it look like if
mm,
I went ahead? And the reality is, nobody, myself, a lawyer, anybody is going to be able to tell somebody this is exactly what you're going to get. This is exactly where you're going to land at the
mm,
end of your divorce.
mm.
So that fear kicks in as well. Do you hear a lot of that as well around,
Oh yeah,
these
you
parent
you are
thoughts?
describing it perfectly. And what I do with people is I help them learn because nobody teaches us
Mm.
how your emotions are created. So your emotions don't happen to you. They're not drifting by and you catch them like a cold. You create your emotions.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
understanding how you create your emotions and then learning the skill of tolerating uncomfortable emotion. This is emotional resilience. We're not
Yes.
taught it. So uh, I will work with someone, we'll explore the topic and all the emotions will come up. And in the session, you will learn, you'll explore that emotion. Your emotions are created by what you choose to focus on, the story you're telling yourself. So the imagined fears. Then what happens in your body? This is like a reflex action. You micro hunch and tense and then the language that you use.
Yes.
And then you'll start talking in catastrophic language of, and I'll have to leave, and I can't afford to leave, or that it will mess the children up. And you're using very emotive, loaded language. And those three things will create your experience. So when you learn to break that stuff down, you can learn to explore the decision making, uh, but tolerate the discomfort of that, and you can then start to work through, which is where you come in, Chloe, with the actual helping. You are helping people explore this, and then which is what I love so much about you. You're not only going to help them with the practicalities, but you're going to do the coaching work of managing the intense fear and discomfort that will come up with exploring what it would look like to get divorced.
And I think something that people often get very hung up, and rightly so, because it is a fear about, how much they're going to get financially, where they're going to be able to live, what happens with the care of the children. Those are very concrete and real problems and concerns. But one thing that I often tell my clients is think about what the reward is in going through this discomfort. And in 99% of cases, there is no financial reward to divorcing. Very few people come out of divorce better off than they were before financially. That is not what you're after. You're not getting divorced because you're trying to bank in, and check in on that financial settlement. The prize is your freedom, it's your opportunity to start afresh, it's being happy and grounded, potentially starting a new relationship. And so that's where having that objective, if you have that very strong vision, you're willing to go through the pain. It's like people who delay getting on a diet, going on a diet.
Mm,
What keeps you going? It's not, nobody wants to be on a diet. It's not the experience of being on a diet that we're looking for. It's
mm,
the result. And how are you going to feel wearing that bikini next summer?
mm.
And it's the same idea. And I think that's where being able to visualize that future becomes really essential because that's what keeps you going.
Yeah, that's so interesting. What comes up for me is the reason people don't set goals is because if I don't set a goal, I don't have to fail and I don't have to experience the discomfort of failure. Um, Deciding to break up a marriage, how do you navigate those feelings of failure and shame that people are having that they probably don't even realize they're having? I mean, how do you deal with that? How does it get said out loud?
Sometimes it doesn't, as you're saying. It's often things that are not verbalized and maybe not even conscious, that there is, a stigma, a fear of how it'll be perceived, etc. But again, if they can think about examples of people around them who have divorced successfully,
Mm,
that's helpful too, because I think we remember always the horror stories and we know
mm,
what we don't want.
mm,
But which is good because it tells you already which direction you're not heading into or you don't want to heading into. But there are plenty of people who divorce without all the drama and fanfare that you see in family court. And so keeping your eye on that as well as possible path. And there's two people in the relationship. You can never control what the other person's doing, but
mm.
there's a lot you can do to make sure that things go in the direction you want them to go, that they don't end up in court, that they don't become high conflict, because you're one of the two players. And I think that's actually quite empowering to know that there's a lot you can do. But for a lot of people, it's also very scary. And that's where there's a lot of confidence that needs to be built up. And a lot of for many clients, they're not able to make that decision
Mm.
until the confidence has been built that actually they can do it and they can hold their ground and they can make it happen in a way that works for them.
And also I talk about the relief of the decision. There is
Hmm.
relief in a
There's
decision.
really,
There is
absolutely.
relief. It's
Yeah.
very interesting. When people come to me saying, I don't know if I want to work on the relationship or should I stay or should I go, I I will always the agreement with me is that we are going to work on this relationship. I will often those people are coming alone. They're not
Mhm.
coming as a couple because they cannot get, for whatever reason, either they have chosen to or the other partner is refusing to work on it or they don't want to work on it together. And I always challenge people to show up using
Mhm.
these skills for 3 to 6 months. If it doesn't shift it, you have your true answer. You will have a true picture of where the relationship really is at because you've worked on your side of the street. I call it a dance. The clients in
Yeah,
front of me, they're
exactly.
not my client. The dance they do is my client. So let's address your steps in this dance. We'll change them. We'll go shift you from losing strategies to winning strategies. And if that hasn't shifted things, then you have a clear and real answer. And I always say to people, there's one thing you won't live with if you do this work with me, and that's regret.
Yes. And there's a lot of, I think that's a very important piece because there's a lot of guilt and fear of regret. What if I do this and then it wasn't the right decision? And
Yes.
you only know once you've done it, right? It's only in hindsight that you're going to get that clarity. But thinking about what needs to change, that's what I always tell people as well who are on the fence. And I've had clients stop saying, actually, I don't think I'm ready to proceed, which is absolutely their prerogative. And I really hope that their marriage succeeds. What I would always encourage people to do is to ask themselves, can I stay in the marriage as it is today? If the answer is no, what needs to change?
Mm,
And set clearly for themselves. It doesn't mean that they're holding the other person necessarily accountable, that there's some kind of contract between them, just for themselves. In 3 months, 6 months, whatever time, what will need to have changed for me to feel that I'm okay to stay in this relationship?
mm,
Because to me, the saddest thing is people who stay in a relationship that is unhappy and unsatisfactory to them. And then they wake up 20 years later and they never get that time back. And that's the fear when you postpone because you're afraid or because status quo is so comfortable. You don't get that time back. And I think that's something for people to keep in mind because
that's it.
it's important to take your time, but not too much time because you don't get it back.
Yeah, that's it. And that's exactly the same argument I make around children. We're staying together for the sake of the children,
Yes. Yeah, that's
uh,
another common.
which on the surface seems like can often seem like it's for the children, but I ask people to do the work. Are you sure this is for the kids? Or is it because you're actually too scared to go?
Yeah.
And having that conversation around the fact that I think that more children are living in blended and single families now than traditional families.
Probably, or at least equally.
Yeah. And so children can survive divorce. They can
Of
survive
course.
divorce. And so my advice to people there is always if it's emotionally abusive, if there's abuse of any kind, if it's volatile and emotionally abusive, I mean, obviously domestic violence, any kind of addiction is a completely different subject. I'm talking about if it's volatile, emotionally abusive, that is not in the best interest for the children to be kept in that relationship must end. If you cannot end the volatility and the emotional abuse, you must break it up. If it's quiet, withdrawn, resignation, distance, quietly distant, then maybe it is okay to stay, but just know that that's the relationship you're modeling for your children.
And I was going to say exactly that. I think that's really important, and it's often something that I try to get people to think of as well, because staying for the children, there's an underlying assumption that being with a married couple, living with married parents, is better than living with divorced parents. But what children need are happy parents, not married parents. They don't give a hoot whether they're married or not. And so
Well,
on paper, it makes no difference, but it's better for them to, they feel safer when they have both of their parents who love them, who are there, who are aligned in parenting. So all the research shows it's the conflict that hurts the children, not the separation itself.
mm,
And so what I often encourage people to think about is, what are they modeling? If their child in 20 years' time told them about this relationship as if it was their own and said, I'm married to this person and this is how I feel and this is what my life looks like, what would they tell them?
oh,
Because of
that's
course
a
we always want the
great
best for our children,
question.
right? Somehow we are less, especially as parents, we tend to put our own interests below. But if it's our children, and it's very clear, we would tell our kid, get
Mm,
out of there,
mm,
then we should apply that advice to ourselves, because
mm.
actually we're much more objective in that way of looking at it.
Yeah, my heart goes out to people in these situations. It is so, so tough. But I think the kids is a great motivator. How do you want to show up? What model do you want to show to your children? I know for me, it was a huge motivator for me to do this work. It was what legacy do I want to pass on to my daughter?
That's exactly it. And especially if you've got a child from the same gender, you don't
Yeah,
want to see them repeating those mistakes. And even
yeah,
if it's something you can settle for and live with, is that what you would wish upon
mm,
anybody?
yeah,
Is good enough? And it's
yeah.
a very subjective evaluation. It's very specific to every person. And there's all
Mm,
sorts of factors. And I think that in a lot of cases, there's really no right or wrong. It has to be the right decision for that
mm,
person. And
yes.
nobody, I think we're all tempted to seek out advice because
Mm,
we're struggling with that question. And
mm,
and I get a lot of people who tell me, what would you do? But it's not
yeah,
my marriage.
yeah,
And it's not my life. And I
yeah.
think while other people's perspectives are helpful, I would be wary of, getting advice and taking the advice of somebody else, because that is the right decision in their reality, not necessarily in your own.
What's coming up for me is just repeatedly in this conversation, you and I are articulating the experience of being terrified of making the wrong decision.
Yeah.
And of course, nobody can see into the future to know which was the right and which was the wrong decision. And that is why you and I exist, to
Yeah.
help people really work through the decision
Yeah.
and make it clearly from a rational regulated. I call it the wise adult because we have these little kids who come along and take control of things. We learn these responses and reactions we had very young, and that comes up, and rational thinking goes out the window, and we're back to these little kids. And so making that wise adult decision so you can be at peace
Yeah.
with and stand by the decision you make is
Mm.
exactly why you and I exist.
Yeah, exactly. And you'll only know later if it was the right decision. But if you're convinced in that moment, and if every step you've taken has been based on
Exactly.
proper reflection and
Yes.
certainty that that was the right way
Yeah.
forward, then at least you have no regrets. And I think that's
Yes.
really what's important is not feeling like you've lost time of your life that you could have spent feeling a lot happier.
Yeah, that's it. And of course I would say this, but having done the work myself, it really is the best investment you can ever make. This is the most important your romantic relationship is the foundation for everything else.
Yes.
And so making this decision wisely is going to impact the rest of your life and the next generations as well.
Yes. It's interesting as well. Lately, I've had a few cases for some reason. I tend to have trends in cases, and these days I've had a few that have where the marriage has been part of a very tightly knit community, often a religious community, and
Mm,
the divorce is much more than just divorcing the other person. It
mm.
has a massive ripple effect through family, friends, community, and then it becomes an even harder decision because you're not just separating from that person. You know that you're going to lose a lot of friends. Some communities you might even lose your family. They're not even allowed to talk to you anymore. I had one client, her family cut her off after she decided to divorce because it was unacceptable in their community to get divorced. Sometimes your families are very close friends, and so that decision is going to impact many, many people. And those are really difficult decisions because they're about more than just you in the end. And
Wow.
they involve a lot of guilt. And I don't know how you deal with people's guilt and that sense of I'm hurting others beyond just the other spouse and your children. It can have such a widespread. Is that something you hear a lot?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are learned responses and reactions. These are the meaning we give, the experience we have, it our automatic response under pressure is learned young
Yeah,
and it's passed down. So you have the weight of the generations before you and doing the work of freeing yourself from the weight of this
yeah,
and stepping into your own thinking, feelings, and beliefs, and
yeah,
having the courage and the bravery to do this.
yeah,
It, you know, in my opinion, through my own learned experience and that of my clients, it really is necessary to work with a professional to do this.
mhm,
So yes, it is very difficult, but with professional help, you can make these decisions regardless of all of these circumstances. You
yeah,
can make the right decision for you. For me, I'm teaching people relational mindfulness. We live in an anti-relational system. Our system is built for stability, not for connection.
yeah, that's true.
50 years ago, if you went to your mother and said, I'm unhappy in my marriage, your mother would say, does he beat you? Does he put food on the table? Go away, you have a great
Yeah,
marriage.
mm,
Things have changed, but the system hasn't. We've changed. We want more, but the system hasn't. And the courage to move beyond that, especially if you're in a very traditional, close-knit community, is huge. But with the skills, you can do it. You can do
yeah.
it.
Do you work to a particular framework to help people through decision making? How would you help people through this?
I'm a Tony Robbins trained coach, so I'm using his coach skills, and I'm also a Relational Life Institute coach. And so, yes, I am teaching people relational mindfulness. I'm teaching people the relation skills that nobody teaches us,
Yeah,
how to. We move into individualistic protection. We move into defend, attack. It's just human nature. And it's also the culture at large. And I teach people to move beyond that, how to stay grounded and
Yeah.
connected while speaking your mind,
Hmm.
while standing up for us with love, not standing up for yourself. We have this
Yeah.
very individualistic way of putting in boundaries and standing up for ourselves, which is anti-relational. And so teaching people to move beyond that
Yeah.
and use the communication skills and the emotional management skills required to have these really tough, honest conversations we need to
Yeah.
keep our relationships thriving long term. I always like to say to people, this work isn't safe. Because a safe relationship is a dead relationship, and a
Yes.
live relationship is dangerous. It is edgy because you are going to have to continually realign and have those honest conversations so you can realign. If you think through the life stages, if you
Mhm.
think about you meet when you're young, you shift into, in a traditional heterosexual experience, you shift into parenthood, then into middle age, then into older age. The work required to navigate each of these stages and stay aligned is because you become completely different people.
Yeah.
It's the myth that it should be easy.
No.
The
And I
myth.
think that's why a lot of couples break up is they
Yes.
stop being willing to put the work in because they're exhausted effectively. Or for whatever other reason actually. But there's a point at which I see people saying, maybe I could change it. I can't be bothered anymore. I'm exhausted with this relationship.
Well, why they're exhausted is because they don't know how to repair. And so we are not taught how to repair. So it's not that they can't be bothered, it's that they don't know how.
I don't know where
And
to
the
start.
way
Yeah.
they've been trying doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so, because it's never the topic that we're arguing about, that's the problem. It's the dance we do around it. So it's our defense, I call them your automatic conflict moves. Your automatic conflict moves when it gets tough, do a dance with your partners, and that is what prevents you from coming together and working on stuff together. So we run out of steam because you keep trying, and no matter what you do, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And it's because you're working with one arm tied behind your back in the system we live in, which is
Yeah.
anti-relational.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, and that's something I often tell people is you're caught in a dance, and a lot of times during divorce, you see that
You're doing it.
continue.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so everybody, the one who tends to yell continues to yell, the one who tends to
Yeah.
withdraw continues to withdraw. And so then it makes it really hard to resolve the conflict because they're still continuing in that pattern. And again, if one person changes their steps, the dance is different. And there
Yeah.
is an empowerment in being able to do things differently and to change that dynamic that's been
Yeah.
really, established for decades sometimes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you'll have been doing it's there. These are reflex moves that you don't even know you're doing. And not only that, but if you don't understand your part in the dance, you will take it into the next relationship.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you repeat those errors and those patterns.
Yeah.
Like one last thing that I guess I wanted to throw out there is I feel in a lot of what I do is there's still a lot of stigma, taboo, fear around divorce, and it's still seen as a traumatic experience, which statistics show it is. It doesn't have to be. And that's very much what Divorce Differently stands for, is it doesn't have to be a destructive experience. And one thing that I find very helpful with clients is to like look at the proverbial monster under the bed. Like you would do with your child who's crying at night. There's a monster under my bed. You turn on the light. No monster. Now you can go back to bed. And there is an element of facing and exploring what that could look like. And you may decide that you don't want to go down that route, but actually instead of intensifying the fears and exacerbating all the negative scenarios that could go down, trying to look at what the reality on the ground looks like, gather facts, gather information, speak to professionals, then you're making an informed decision. And whichever direction you go, and it may be even a third direction, just separating for a while, you design that. but you're making it based on facts rather than fear. And I think that is really the key, because I don't think any of us want to feel that we've made decisions in our life because we were afraid of doing something else. And that's where the regret comes in. So, whatever the decision is, having faced the fear and really explored it, then you know what you're deciding. And it is a conscious decision again.
It's so true. And so, what would it look like to get divorced? That question is now, if that's the place my clients are at, I send them your way. And because it's really a valuable exercise to, like you say, let's look at the monster under the bed. Let's look at worst case scenario. Yeah.
Exactly it. That's
And let's
exactly.
just get, make peace with worst case scenario, because it may not actually be worst case scenario.
And
And
even worst case scenario, how would you deal with it? And actually, even in that
yeah,
worst case
yeah,
scenario,
yeah.
you probably would deal with it and you'd find a solution.
Right. Yeah, yeah. For my clients, every day, for me, myself, in the journey of this work that I've done for myself, moving from dysfunctional uh, relationships from childhood, taking them into my adult life, they were repeating until I did this work. And for me, and it is work. And for me, the driver every single day is, how do I want to show up? How do I want to look back? I want to be able to look back and say, I did the best I could, regardless of what was coming at me. I showed my child the best example to be. And that is how I guide my clients every single day, so that we can get out of the circumstances of, you and I have talked, for example, you're in a difficult divorce, your partner's buying you out the property, they're offering you less than market value, and you can fight to the bitter end to get that, what you believe is the fair market value for it, or you can choose your sanity, that couple of years you're going to lose fighting this person over it, to walk away and just be able to answer that question of, I showed up, I showed an example. And I think that being able to have that as a real driving force and a real central belief is how you move forward through either healing or ending a relationship.
I love that. We'll end on these wonderful words of wisdom. Thank you so much, Naomi. So many helpful insights and a really interesting conversation. I guess a final call to action to those who feel that they need support trying to fix their relationship, getting it back, and actually untying that hand that's behind their back.
Yes.
Naomi's the person to go to, and probably a combination. Maybe, if you want to explore what divorce could look like, I'm of course always available for people who need that kind of support.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much,
much, Naomi.
Chloe.
Have a
Pleasure.
lovely day. Bye.
keep your lines of communication open as much as
I
possible.
like that.
And that is going to be very much, it is going to be very much dependent on the dynamics between you, but find a way of communicating that's going to work for you, even if it's just in the short term. If you feel that having direct conversations aren't going to work for you, think about whether you do that via a parenting app or via email. And touching on what I was talking about earlier in terms of not having big conversations at difficult times of day. So keeping those lines of communication open, but with boundaries in place to protect yourself in terms of having those conversations, and making them productive as possible, I think is really important, and something to really think about doing.
I like that last tip. I think it makes a lot of sense. And actually, in a lot of ways, coming to an agreement on these short-term solutions can set a really good precedent to, okay, we found solutions. It wasn't ideal and we both struggled, but we managed. And so that means we can do it as well with the big picture items. So it's a nice way as well of getting that under your belt.
I think so. And I think you often find people who can't talk necessarily immediately, and they do end up, say, perhaps doing it over a parenting app or doing it via email. Once things have diffused a bit, they can open those conversations up more directly. It just gives them that bit of time and reflective space to manage it in the best way possible, to then being able to move it forward. And that's something I often talk to people about in mediation. It's like, well, what works now? And then we can have a look about how that might shift once things have calmed down a bit and once there's a bit more certainty about what's happening. It's just about finding a channel that you can both work with, and keeping an open mind about how that might change itself as things move on.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Emma. So many helpful tips. I'm going to put your email address in the notes for the in the section, the description of the episode, so people can contact you if they have any questions. Is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
I didn't think so, no, but thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining me. Take care, Emma.
Thank you.